and talk about my labour and delivery. So I will start with the main attraction. Here he is. He's not going to play ball or look. He's incredibly cute, but he's really grizzly at this minute. So he's not going to show it, but I'll try and show you again in a second. So yeah, my labour and delivery, I'm not 100% sure how this is going to come off in this video, because I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about my labour and delivery. If I'd filmed this video last week, then it would have been a really negative video, and this week I'm feeling a little bit like better, like more indifferent about how things went. So basically what happened is I had a 39-hour labour, so a really long one. It was quite intense, and also it ended in a C-section, and I've been quite poorly afterwards. So yeah, so that's kind of how things have been. So I'll start from the beginning. So on Sunday the 30th of October, I had some very slight kind of niggly pains every so often. But it never really established, so I just assumed that it was what I'd been feeling for the last couple of weeks and went to bed. And then the next morning at 6:30 AM-ish on the 31st of October, so Halloween, I felt like a pop in my stomach and heard it too, and kind of thought like maybe that was my waters that had just broke. But as nothing had happened, like if you've watched my pregnancy updates, you'll know that I had like clicking sounds in my stomach for quite a while anyway. I just assumed it was a big one of those. And I made like a joke to Rich when he got out of the shower that there was a pop. He like told me to stand up and get out of bed and see what would happen, and nothing happened. So we were just like, okay, it was nothing. And then I went downstairs to go and make his lunch for him, because obviously I was on maternity leave, so that's what I was doing. And all of a sudden there was just like a gush on the kitchen floor, and I kind of wasn't really sure if it was like my waters or wee or discharge. This is gross, the whole video is gonna be gross, so we'll start from there. So I kind of shouted Rich down, wanted him to come and see, and it just kept coming basically. So I was pretty sure it's my waters. So rang the labour ward, which is what you're supposed to do straight away, and they asked me to come in at 10 for an assessment. So it's about 10 to 7 by now. So yeah, so just kind of got ready, got dressed, I hoovered out the car, like wasn't any discomfort or anything. And then went to the labour ward. They confirmed that my waters had broken and basically said that you've got 24 hours to try and establish labour. If you don't establish labour in those 24 hours, then they'll induce me. So I was booked in for an induction the next day at 9 AM. So I kind of wanted labour to start by itself really, because I didn't want to wait. So yeah, so I was quite glad my waters went. I really wanted my waters to go, which sounds stupid, but I knew that with labour I would be constantly like, is this it? And then it wouldn't be it. So to have something quite like obviously starting labour really like made me feel relieved, and it was quite funny. And Rich found it hilarious because he really wanted my waters to break in some kind of dramatic style, like all over the kitchen floor, which they did. So yeah, so that was kind of that. We were in really good spirits at this point, like really excited, like packing bags in the car and just getting ready. So yeah, so drove back from the hospital. By this point I'm starting to have kind of like niggly period pains, and we did say that we were going to go walk into town and pick up a few bits for the hospital, get something to eat, and obviously going for a walk helps with labour. But I was like soaking through pads and my leggings at a rate of knots, so I couldn't leave the house. So yeah, so about 11:30, maybe lunchtime, my contractions, they weren't contractions like all over the belly, but my pains were starting to really hot up. So I was having like mild pains, but they were every 4 minutes, so there wasn't really much of a break, and they were about 30 seconds long. So I was kind of in a constant state of discomfort at this point, and the pains were kind of in my back and in my hips. So sitting down was really uncomfortable. And when I was at the hospital, I'd asked what contractions feel like, and they were like, oh, it'll be a pain all over your belly. So I knew it wasn't contractions yet, and I still had to wait. But I was getting nervous that like maybe I was in back labour, not like normal labour, because of the time of the contractions, like the pains were, like because they were 4 minutes apart. That's quite odd. Like normally when you're in early labour it will be like 30 minutes apart. So I wasn't really getting a break, so I decided to go and have a bath, and I think I literally spent about 7 hours in the bath. without even really realising. Like obviously like Rich kept popping up, my mum came round, and pains were getting bad, and because of the timings of them, Rich kind of suggested that we actually just go to the hospital because 4 minutes apart is quite, like that's normally like regular labour, or like you're well on your way to it. So my mum drove us to the hospital at 6 p.m. So I'd been in labour about 11 hours at this point, like, well, since my waters had broke, it'd been like 11 hours at this point. So yeah, so I was kind of comfortable. In hindsight, I was comfortable at this point. Like now I know what full labour feels like. I was definitely comfortable at this point, but I didn't feel comfortable at the time. So got there, they gave me an examination, which they were really reluctant to do because my waters are broken and they didn't want to risk infection. And I was only 1 centimetre dilated, which I kind of expected. Like I just knew not to get my hopes up. But we were really lucky and they decided to let us stay in the hospital. They found us a room and let us get comfortable. My mum went back home so she could get some rest. Rich tried to sleep in the hospital, but for me it was just impossible. Like because the pain was in my back and hips, I couldn't lie on my hips, lie on my side because the pain was unbearable, and I couldn't lie on my back because again it was unbearable. So again I just got in the bath and spent probably another, what time, so 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, another 10 hours in the bath. So yeah, so things were just slow, but I was uncomfortable. Rich was asleep, and I remember about 5 o'clock in the morning, no, it was earlier than that, about 3 o'clock in the morning was when my contractions really started, and it was like really sharp pain all over my belly, which felt like convulsions, like they're making me like kind of want to be sick, and it just felt like a real big tightening around my belly, like somebody was really squeezing. It was agony. Like I really felt with labour that I'd be kind of strong and laid back, and I was remaining really calm all through the pains. Everyone kind of made a point to say how calm I was and stuff. But at this point, yeah, I was struggling, and I was tired as well, which really didn't help. Like I'd been awake for a long time, and because my back really hurt and I just couldn't sit comfortably, I was getting really frustrated. Like I couldn't go to the toilet without a contraction starting and it being absolutely horrendous. So yeah, so Rich was asleep at this point, and I remember like kind of like banging on the walls because I was in the bathroom and just trying to get through it. I really didn't want to wake him up because I wanted him to be like as best as he could be for actual labour. And I just knew that I wasn't dilating because I'd been checked again and I was only 2 centimetres, so I didn't really see the point in waking anybody up or doing anything like that. So yeah, I was sick as well at one point during labour because of the pain. So my Domino's pizza that I'd ate during that time came up, but I was actually getting worried because my waters are broken and I was being sick that maybe I had a fever, but I didn't, it was just the pain. And like I do have quite a high pain tolerance, so it was pretty intense. So yeah, what else happened? It's all a bit blurry. So Rich eventually was like, you need to get out of the bath because it's not helping. So I was having really bad contractions for an hour now, but in the bath they were more painful but becoming less frequent, whilst out the bath they were less painful but constant. Like as soon as one would die off, another one would come back up. It was just like my mum couldn't get her head around my whole labour. Like the pain just never stopped. There was never a break. I could never sit down, I could never rest. So it was quite intense. So we'd called the midwife when I was in the bath, and she said my contractions weren't far apart enough, so she left. And then this is when Rich was like, right, you need to get out of the bath, and I think it's relaxing you too much and it's not helping things progress. So I got out of the bath, and yeah, my contractions were like, I was having like 6 to every 5 minutes, and he called back the midwife and she could not believe that she'd just left the room. And then I got out of the bath and things established that quickly. Like I'd obviously been putting things off in the bath. So yeah, she gave me an examination and I was 5 centimetres dilated at 5 AM. At this point I'd vouched that the second I could have an epidural I would. and that was quite a big thing because I'd always said like my whole pregnancy that I didn't really want an epidural, I wanted a water birth, and obviously to have an epidural you can't have a water birth. And like, yeah, I'd always said that I didn't really want it, but at this point I just wanted to rest. Like, I needed to be able to sleep, I needed to be able to sit down, I was exhausted. So I said to the midwife that I would epidural. She was really good. I was expecting her to try and talk me out of it, but she was like, nope, that's fine, I'll go sort it out. But she did give me gas and air. Gas and air is amazing, like it's the best stuff in the world. It really did help take the edge off, and it got me through another 2 hours, so I didn't get my epidural till 7, and I didn't even notice that that was 2 hours. I literally thought it was about 20 minutes. My contractions, I could barely feel them when I was having the gas and air, like it was so much better. But the thing that was upsetting me now is that I was about 7 centimetres dilated, but I was having such a big urge to push. Baby's head was really low, and I couldn't sit again, like, because I couldn't, the pain of his head being so low in my pelvis was too much. So I decided to still go through the epidural, despite my mum kind of trying to talk me out of it. And yeah, the epidural was the most amazing thing in the world. Like, that is some good stuff. Like, it completely took every bit of feeling away. I was really relaxed and really chilled, and just kind of started to enjoy labour again. So it's probably about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at this point on the 1st of November. So yeah, so I had my epidural, loved it. And yeah, then labour started, like, as it's quite a common, well-known thing that epidurals can slow labour down, and it did. Basically, it just completely stopped my labour from progressing. So I then had to be induced again to try and get labour to progress. So being induced again took a really long time, and took quite a while for me to get to the big 10 centimetres. So I think it was about 7 p.m. that I finally hit 10 centimetres, but there was concern over a small part of my cervix not quite moving. Like, I was 10 centimetres dilated, but there was a slight lip that just wouldn't get off his head, and baby's head was getting a little bit swollen, so they were kind of concerned about that too. So at 7 p.m. they tried to push the lip off, and it wasn't coming, like it wasn't moving, so they decided to just try and push, basically. So 7 p.m. came along. My epidural was wearing off slightly because something had gone wrong in like the back, like it was leaking. So yeah, it was slightly wearing off. I could start to feel things, which was okay. It was just uncomfortable, like my back hurt a bit, but I could feel the need to push, which was really helpful, because it just helped me do it. Pushing I found quite therapeutic. I'd been pushing for like an hour and a half and didn't even realise. I thought it'd been about 10 minutes, but I just knew that despite me pushing, nothing was happening. Like, no one said anything because no one wanted to discourage me, but I just kind of knew that it wasn't, you know, you shouldn't be pushing that long without something happening. So I was getting disheartened and I was getting tired, because by now it's about 9:30 at night, and obviously I've been awake for, oh god, I don't even know, 24 plus 12, like 36 hours ish, so 37 hours. So yeah, I was pretty tired and had just kind of had enough now, and the word C-section had been thrown around a couple of times in the day. So yeah, I was just kind of accepting that that was probably where we were going. So they called a doctor in, and they called a doctor in, and basically they said that the baby hasn't moved at all. So I had been pushing for 2 hours for the baby to stay in the exact same position, and it kind of transpired that his head was on a funny angle, so he just was stuck. So they kind of made the call that it needs to be a C-section. At that point I just didn't care, like, I might cry. yeah, so I don't know why I'm crying, because that's just the way that I feel about things, I guess. So yeah, at this point I just kind of stopped caring, and I didn't really care what happened. I just wanted the baby out, and I was conscious that it'd been well over 24 hours since my waters had broken. Both our risk of infection was quite high, and his head was swollen, which was making me nervous. even though like literally the whole of my labour, his obs, like his heartbeat and stuff was perfect. Like he was under no distress at any point whatsoever. Like all the midwives kept commenting about like how happy he was. So yeah, so they obviously come in. My mum started crying. Oh god, I'm gonna cry. My mum started crying and I felt I don't even know why I'm crying. Yeah, so I felt really guilty because she really wanted to be there for the birth of him. And obviously it could only be me and Rich that went down. That's not even why she was crying. She was crying for me because it had been such a long time to get there. And then it was just going to be a C-section. So it might as well have been a C-section in the first place. I don't even know why I'm crying. Right, stop. So yeah, and my main priority at this point was to remain as calm as possible because I knew Rich and my mum would be really worried, so I didn't want them to think that I was worried, so I just wanted to kind of remain really, really calm, which I did. So obviously they come in, they read you this big thing about all the risks of a C-section, and if I'm being honest, I didn't listen to any of it. Like I just didn't even want to hear the risks of a C-section when you have no choice, but they have to read it to you and you have to sign a consent form, which is quite scary. They obviously like shave your bikini line, put on those stocking things to stop you from getting blood clots, and then wheeled us down. Yeah, so I was scared about the pain relief thing because I knew that my epidural had been leaking and they were going to be using the same thing. So they were quite conscious to be really careful to make sure that the pain relief was going to work because I had to have new forms of pain relief. So yeah, everyone in the cesarean room, like the operating theatre, was so nice and like really chatty, and they played music and they just made it really, really lovely experience, as best as it could be. But I'd started to just get really tired, a little bit upset. So stupid. Anyway, see, I thought I was better than this, but I'm not. Oh, I'm such an ugly crier. So yeah, everyone was really nice at making it calm, but I was kind of scared, like not scared for the operation or anything. I'd watched enough YouTube videos to understand what to expect from a C-section, and I'm so glad I did. Like I'd always joked like that I needed to educate myself about C-section just in case, but I never ever in a million years thought I would ever have a C-section. It's so stupid. Anyway, so yeah, there were like quite a few things that went through my head. Like obviously you want to have your pain relief. I was trying to be brave for Rich because I knew that he would be shitting himself. And yeah, like it's quite a invasive procedure. It's as bad as everybody tells you that it will be. You don't feel them cut you open, but you feel every kind of motion. You don't feel pain obviously, but you feel so much tugging, like, and when you know it's, oh I don't know, I don't even know if I can say the sentence without crying. There's something horrible about having your body being treated that brutally, and being awake for it. Like obviously that's exactly what they have to do and you just get on with it and it's fine, and you know it's not a big deal. But when you're awake and your body is just being pulled apart, it's quite a big thing. It makes you feel a bit sad. So no, they'd pre-warned me that because he was pretty much in, like, he was very, very low down, it would be much harder to get him out, and you could just tell that it was. So yeah, he came out at 10:21 p.m. Yeah, and that he came out. They brought him over, and the worst kind of part is, and I don't feel guilty about this, but I do want to talk about it because it's important. they brought him over, and I remember looking at him and just thinking, he's beautiful. Like, he is absolutely a beautiful baby. Like, I will show you properly in a minute. So I'm thinking he's beautiful, but that's pretty much it. Like, there was no rush of love that you're supposed to have. I remember just thinking, like, I just want to sleep. Forgot to mention as well is that the new painkillers had made me start to really like really shake. Like, my whole body just wouldn't stop shaking. They were trying to cover me up in blankets thinking I was cold, but literally I just couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't control it, and it was making me like really anxious. And I'm not anxious at all, like I'm a really calm person, but I found that quite stressful. So they brought Rory over. I'm thinking he is beautiful, and I couldn't believe the way he looked, because he just looked like an angel. Like, I've never seen such a beautiful looking baby in my life, and I know I'm biased, but like, he is stunning. Like, and I remember thinking that, and I remember hearing the midwife say that he has really long eyelashes, but that's pretty much all I felt. Like, it could have been any baby that they brought over, which is quite sad. Like, you don't get your moment, and I don't know if that's true for every cesarean section mum, but I know a couple of people had that. I don't feel guilty for it, because me and Rory have like an amazing bond now, but obviously after 9 months you build up for this amazing one born every minute moment that you're going to have, and you're going to be so in love with your baby and feel this huge rush of love, and it just didn't happen. And I remember, like, they put him on me, but they put him on me in such a way, like my hand was like here, because I had to have it over my chest because they were doing my blood pressure or something, and they kind of put him on my hand, so I couldn't even hold him properly, and he was like stuck in the wires, and I couldn't really see him because he was so high up. So I was just like, can you get him off me? Which makes me really sad to say. Rich said that I cried at that point, so I obviously felt something, but I don't remember crying, and he said that he cried, but I don't really remember that. Yeah, so I was like, can you please get him off me? And then they gave me some other form of medication, I don't know what it was for, and that started to make me feel really sick, like I was gonna puke, which is quite panicky, because obviously when you're lying flat, like I just couldn't, I don't have any movement, and they're trying to stitch me up. I just couldn't suss out how I was gonna be sick, but luckily I wasn't. When they come to stitch you up, it's a really brutal thing. They like push on your chest, they are like pushing on your belly, like so hard to try and shrink down your womb. It's like they're kneading bread. And that for me was horrible, like really horrible. They'd given Rory to Rich, and I couldn't find Rich because they'd moved his stool out of my eye line. So at this point, all I could think to do was just try and fall asleep. So that's what I did. Like, I woke myself up a couple of times snoring. And then after this, oh, the other thing I never really thought is during a cesarean, they literally pull your robe up from your like bottom to your like just under your boobs, and you don't have pants on, so you're quite exposed. Like, it's quite a weird thing. Not that it mattered, because after labour, like, I just didn't really care who saw me naked, but I didn't really think about it, like, you're just lying there like nude, and they've got a catheter in and stuff like that. It's all quite intrusive. Then they're trying to move me off the bed, and that's quite weird because you've got like 4 people stood over you and you're being like put, I don't know, it's just a weird experience. So they wheeled me back into a room, which is where my mum was waiting, and she'd brought my stepdad at this point because I guess she needed some moral support. It's quite lonely for her, and I guess she's worried because her baby is having surgery. Yeah, and she brought, like, they brought me in, and then Rich brought Rory in, and like it was really nice because she was really emotional. Like, she cried about how beautiful he is, because he is. I think she'd even said like, oh, you really get some ugly babies, but he's gorgeous. And then they were kind of trying to sort me out a little bit, and then they offered me skin to skin with Rory. So I had that. But again, like, there wasn't that same emotion that I was expecting from my first skin to skin with him. I was just glad to see what he looked like. One thing that made me really proud is that he was crying, but the second they put him on my chest, he stopped. And they had said something about how they can recognise your scent and your voice from the womb. So that was really nice. Like, that kind of started to kickstart our bond, because like my baby had been comforted by me, which is quite a nice, yeah, it's a really nice thing. Soon after I was back in the room though, and the room cleared out a bit, I started to feel sick, so I wasn't very well. I had a fever, and I was starting to, like, my skin just, I wanted to claw it off. It was so itchy from the drugs and being in the bath for 18 hours. It just dried my skin out so badly. So I was starting to get really irritable about that. So yeah, basically I had got an infection from my waters breaking too, so I was poorly because of that. And I had lost a lot of blood. So I'd lost about 2.5 pints of blood, which was quite severe. Obviously, I think your body's made of like 8 pints, so I'd lost a lot. And yeah, didn't feel very well. So I'd lost a lot of blood. I can't remember what I was saying. Yeah, I can't remember what I was saying. So yeah, everyone kind of went pretty soon after that. Like, obviously, I think it was like nearly 2 AM once like we'd settled down and stuff. And Rich was absolutely exhausted, my mum was tired. Yeah, so they left us, no, it can't have been 2 AM, it must have been earlier than that, because they moved me into the ward at 2 AM. So I was left for about an hour with Rory in a room, which is where the bond started to really kick off. They'd left me, like, at first with him like a million miles away from my bed, and obviously after a cesarean you can't move your legs or anything. So I called the midwife at one point to like bring him closer to me, and they gave me something to eat and stuff, which made me feel 10 times better. So yeah, so I just kind of wanted to sleep for a bit. I was exhausted at this point, like I was really struggling to keep my eyes open. But with Rory, every little peep that he made, I was like wide awake, making sure he was still okay. So yeah, so at 2 AM they came in to move me onto the ward, which I really didn't want them to do. I was just staying in that little room on my own, but it was fine, like, because the ward is where they look after you and the baby. And they gave me him to hold whilst we came down, and I remember feeling really proud of him, and it kind of started to sink in at this point. I thought I would feel, so obviously at this point I can't do anything, so the midwife is feeding him and changing him, and I thought I'd feel quite redundant, but I actually didn't. I was just kind of glad for the rest. So got down onto the labour ward, kind of got myself ready, not labour ward, like the postnatal ward, I don't really know what they're called. Got like my stuff out and stuff, and I was a bit confused as to like what I was supposed to do, like if he wakes up, is it my job, like, but the midwife was like, no, you've just had major surgery, if he wakes up you call somebody and we will deal with him. So yeah, so they said, it's like 2 o'clock at this point, they said at 5 o'clock they were going to get me up to take me for a walk and take me to the toilet, because it's quite important that you're up and about reasonably early to, like, again, get over the risk of blood clots. So at 5 o'clock I was able to go to the toilet and walk about and stuff. They said that they would look after Rory still, but because I hadn't fed him, it just felt like it was my turn to do so. Like, it was quite a big thing that I could feed my child, so I kind of took over from that point. He obviously slept like an angel on the first night, like the babies just do because they're exhausted, so he didn't really wake up. We had to wake him up to feed. I woke up quite a lot because I didn't really know his noises yet, and when I was on a ward with 2 other people, so their babies would wake up and cry, and I would assume it was him, but it wasn't, or it was, whatever. So I didn't really get that much sleep, so I kind of tried to lie in as best as I could whilst people were still able to come and check on him and stuff. So yeah, so the next day at 11 Rich came to come and see us, and at 2 it was visiting hour, so I had like my mum popping in like on and off the whole day. And we were just, I was pretty much on a high, like I was really excited about my baby. It felt like he'd been here the whole time, which is when I knew our bond was fine. Despite labour not bringing the bond that I expected, there was no question that we had a bond, like he was my baby. And yeah, I just felt like he'd always been there, like I couldn't picture life before without him, which was lovely. And I just felt like we had like an instant connection. Well, we're not instant obviously, but we just had a connection, which made me feel really good, which is why I don't feel guilty about not feeling anything in labour, but I could see how it's really hard for some people. So yeah, we were on a big high, just kind of got through the day, had visitors, my dad, my brother, my stepdad, Rich's kids came to come and see their little brother. yeah, and just kind of got through the day really. And then they said they were going to discharge me that night at 10:30. My mum was really concerned, like she didn't want me to be discharged at all because I had had the infection. I had also lost a lot of blood, so they were concerned about that, and I was going to be anemic. And yeah, so they said they're going to discharge me at 10:30, which in hindsight I should have stayed at the hospital for another night where I could have got some help, because being discharged at 10:30 meant we didn't leave the hospital until about 11:30. Rich at this point was again shattered because he hadn't really recovered from the whole labour thing, and I probably could have done with staying in hospital for another 12 hours because I was starting to get uncomfortable. I couldn't sit on the sofa without it really hurting my belly. So yeah, it was uncomfortable to sit. I can't remember what I was saying. We'll just try and keep going. So yeah, so it was uncomfortable to sit on the sofa and stuff. But I think we went to bed at about 2 AM, and Rory slept like a saint again that night. We had to wake him up to feed because again he's in that newborn like sleepy lull stage. So the following day is kind of where I started to feel a bit ropey and realised that caesarean recovery is not easy. I think when you have a caesarean, or when you think about caesareans before, all you think about is the scar. I never anticipated the pain in my tummy from obviously everything that happened. So my muscles really hurt, and it was hard to move around, it's hard to walk, I couldn't sit up for myself. Yeah, it was difficult, I couldn't freely move. So on the third night, Rory did not sleep very well at all. He kept spitting out his dummy, and for me to sit up, reach into his Moses basket, put his dummy back in, was like trying to climb Mount Everest. So I was getting really depressed that I couldn't care for my baby in the way that I was supposed to. Lying down in bed wasn't comfortable, and it was just hard. Like, it was really, really sad. So on the third night, Rory and I slept downstairs on the sofa just because it was easier for me to be completely propped up and to be able to tend to him as and when he needed me. Rory wouldn't settle at all, like he really just wouldn't want to be put down, but eventually we got a couple of hours. And I think on the fourth night we had something similar, but eventually he kind of settled, so I came upstairs and put him to bed, and that is when I decided to buy a co-sleeper, which is over there, which is one of the best things that I've ever bought for a caesarean. It just made life so much easier just to be able to have him at arm's length, and I don't have to get out of bed to feed him or anything like that. Well, I do because I've got to make the bottles, but at the time Rich was going down and making the bottles for me. So yeah, but there were just a few days after my caesarean where I just felt really redundant and useless because I couldn't care for my baby in the way that I was supposed to. I couldn't wear normal clothes because you don't want anything too tight around your belly, so like leggings and stuff. I didn't have anything to wear, I just wore a dressing gown for 2 days. I felt really grubby and horrible, and I just felt completely useless. So for the first 3 or 4 days, I would say, I was really, really, really emotional about everything. I couldn't stop crying about stuff. So I would cry about good things, like I would cry about how much I adored my baby, but I would also cry about bad things, like I would think about like another person having a caesarean and I would cry for them. Anything caesarean related would make me cry. And I just felt like we'd been through the mill a bit. Like after the labour, the day after, I was like really put on a brave face, and I was like, oh, considering everything, it was fine, like we did it. And I think afterwards the exhaustion hit me, having a newborn that won't sleep that well hit me, hormones hit me, and just recovery is such hard work. And anyone that's had a caesarean should really be proud. And I hate this whole like easy way out. It's not the easy way out at all. Like to come home and not be able to care for your child as best as you can is horrendous. Like I said, I'd lost a lot of blood, so I was on iron tablets. There are still concerns this far on about my anemia levels, so I had a midwife appointment this morning, and my iron levels keep dropping, so I have to have a blood test in 2 weeks. If it doesn't go back up, then I will need to have a blood transfusion. I've also had really swollen ankles, which is normal after cesarean because you're put on a drip. So yeah, it's normal because the drip, like all the excess fluid goes into your ankles. But in my midwife appointment a couple of days ago, it was picked up that one was bigger than the other, which is a sign of deep vein thrombosis. So I had to go see the GP about that, and then I was referred to have a scan for deep vein thrombosis, which I didn't have a blood clot at the time. However, I don't really understand, there's something in my blood levels, which means that I have to go back next week for an additional scan to make sure that I'm still not at risk of having blood clots, which is a joy. I found out about that on Wednesday, so today is Saturday, and I was still pretty teary. Like, I found out in my doctor's surgery and cried when I walked out of it, just because it felt a bit never-ending. Like, I just wanted to be recovered and well and healthy, and I wanted to be able to tend to my child and feel like myself again. So I've made more of a conscious effort since being better and more mobile to make sure that I get out and do something, make sure I do things around the house, such as even like just small things like loading the dishwasher and wiping down the sides, just to feel human really. And I think it's really important that I get up and get dressed and try and put some makeup on and stuff, like I said, just to feel like myself again. So yes, that's kind of how it all went down. And like I said, like, I'm obviously still quite emotional about it, to cry during this video. I don't know how I feel, like I don't really know what's going to happen in the future with like having another child. I would really like to have another baby. Rich is kind of a little bit less there because he's got 2, and it would be a huge lifestyle change if we had another one. Like, we'd have to move house and buy a different car, and I just don't think he could handle the bedlam. But I would like to have another one as it stands. Like, I'll see how I feel in a couple of years when he's a bit bigger. He might just be enough. But I don't know what I would do for my next labour. I think as it stands right now, I would opt to have a planned C-section, because I don't want to be let down to try a VBAC birth to then have to be rushed in again for an emergency C-section. I've heard that if you plan a C-section, they're much calmer, the recovery is better and stuff like that. But yeah, I think my main shock, like I said, has just been the recovery. Like, I can't believe how exhausting it is. Obviously, nobody else goes through major surgery and is then plonked a newborn the next day to care for. You normally get some recovery time. So obviously you're exhausted, and then he makes you more exhausted, and you're adjusting to life with a newborn, which is a beautiful thing, but it is still an adjustment. Oh, he's cute. He's so cute. So yeah, so it just really shocked me, and I was so emotional about it for days, like really quite down. But yeah, I think I'm getting there now, and hopefully one day I will see my birth experience as a positive again. I do feel really proud of myself that I went through it all. I feel really strong that I managed to keep calm. Like, at the time I felt really like I was being a complete fanny and just wasn't that like dealing with it very well, but in hindsight, like, I was calm for the whole thing. I took everything in my stride. I didn't kick off, I didn't scream in pain. I just was so calm, and I think that I actually did quite well considering it was 39 hours long. I did not sleep for any of it. I was in pain for most of it because I was not allowed pain relief until I was 5 centimeters dilated, and then it all ended in C-section. And yeah, I think we're getting there, and I feel stronger as each day goes on. The more mobile I am, the better it is, so I'm doing everything I can to remain mobile but not push it too much. But yeah, anyway, that's the whole story. I'm pretty sure I've covered everything, and it's a very long video, but that's
making some lunch, and I'm about to edit this video, which is my labour and delivery story, and realised that filming it and crying is quite a negative thing to do, and I don't know how I feel about my labour and delivery still, which I've obviously discussed multiple times. To unexpectedly cry on it, I'm obviously still a little bit upset by things, but the main kind of thing that I wanted to update on right now is that I don't feel that way today. I feel a lot stronger about things. I feel more accepting of how things happened. I think it was just a bit of a shock to the system. Obviously doing a 39-hour labour and it ending the way that it did is quite tiring, and I really wasn't expecting recovery in the first week to be as hard as it was. Just stirring my lunch. As hard as it was. But I really don't want people to be scared of C-sections. Everybody's different, and I'm just whispering because the baby's asleep. Everybody's different, and yeah, you'll recover in your own way. I'm now in week 2, so Rory is 16 days old, I think, and I feel pretty much back to normal. I feel much stronger, I feel way more active and mobile. The only thing that's bothering me is I obviously still can't do heavy lifting and I can't drive, and when I do those things it'll be 100% better. So yeah, just wanted to give a little bit of an update really. And I will now show you how beautiful that little boy is. Try not to wake him up. My absolute little stunner. Hey, baby boy. Hi. Hi. So yeah, all worth it in the end. It's totally worth it. I would do my labour all over again if I had to. Obviously I would like for things to be a little bit different. It's probably my own fault for really hoping for a fast and easy labour, but I am also, you know, I didn't think I had any expectations, but I clearly did. But I am also quite proud of how I dealt with things, and I think it does teach you a lot about yourself. So yeah, just to let you know, I don't feel so negatively. And I think the only thing that made me cry was thinking about the fact that my mum wanted to be in the labour and couldn't. So yeah, anyway, enough of talking about it now. Thanks for watching this video. There's going to be, oh, the light's crap. There's going to be way more baby related stuff coming up, obviously now he's here. And I hope you subscribe and enjoy my videos. Bye.